Hello and welcome to this module of the Sustainability and Global Mobility course. Today I'm really pleased to be joined by John Holm of PYXERA Global. John is a renowned, globally known expert in the circular economy, and the circular economy is one that many are already looking at within mobility, and certainly one that is very, very important and you should look at. But we all need expert knowledge and expertise, and we need to know how to start our journey and where to look. So, John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah, John, we're really, why should we even be having this conversation? I guess is a place to start. And, perhaps you can help us there. Why should we even be looking at the circular economy?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a really good question, Paul. And I think it makes a lot of sense to ask the question first before trying to understand what it is. I think the context and the time of why this term is now front and center on the tips of many people's tongues in the private sector, as well as in the public and social sectors as well. The term circular economy is really nothing new. It's been around for a long time. But I think what we've seen and what's been happening in the last 10 years is that the world is experiencing, the man-made world, and I think it's important to focus on that, is experiencing change at light speed, whether that's technology growing and quickly growing, our population, to where we're looking to having 8 billion people on the planet sooner than later.
Wow.
Yeah, we're really pushing the boundaries, the planetary boundaries of our growth. And I think now what we can see is that humanity has to do something about it, or we're really in big trouble. And that's just science and fact. So if we look at a couple of the conditions which are stemming from this is, we got global warming, and I stem not to call it climate change. Climate change is too soft. The world is heating up. Reports are out left and right telling us that this is true, and there's the 1.5 degrees Celsius that we need to avoid before things cannot be turned back. We're already there. So one is climate and our emissions. The second one we have right now is that we have a problem with waste globally. And when we look at waste, for example, let's talk about that leaching of that waste, which is going into our ecosystems like the ocean. Well, there'll be more by volume. WWF and the UN have found that there'll be more volume plastic in the ocean by 2050 than actual fish. And we're not even talking about, with plastic real quickly, the potential health outcomes of plastic and microplastics that's in abundance. So we have a waste issue. The third issue that we're looking at is inequality. And I mentioned when I say inequality, when you look at circular, it's a transition to a new economic, regenerative, and I would say inclusive platform. And when you look at the circular economy space, a lot of this is about these terms like regeneration. So what we're going to do today is kind of unpack a little bit what these terms mean and why they're here. I want to segue this, especially in the European context, that Europe is always a little bit further ahead, especially where I'm living in North America and the United States specifically. Europe is already experiencing some growth in this stage, and a lot of the enabling environment, whether that's the EU Green Deal or legislation done in countries like the Netherlands, where you're seeing terms like the donut economy emerge. And so I just want to really provide really quick context of terminology, Paul, before we jump into getting specifically on circular. The term donut economy and the circular economy kind of walk hand in hand. With the donut economy, when you see this, Paul, it's really trying to frame more of the planetary boundaries are being stretched. So that's again, emissions, and that's landfills, and that's waste. And what the donut economy does is look at these planetary boundaries and provides a framework of how cities, mostly cities and governments, can work then to make sure that those planetary boundaries are changed to within the limits of where humanity can grow. It also accounts for inclusivity, whether that's social justice or we can say environmental justice, et cetera, but it provides that roadmap. The circular economy, in many contexts, not all contexts, in many contexts, is kind of I would say, the implementation of the donut economy. So when you're looking at that, those are the circular business models that can come out, to we'll also talk about in a second, which can inform that transition to meet those planetary boundaries. So I would say that the donut economy is the map, and the circular economy, to a degree, can be the implementation of meeting those limits. I hope that can provide context, because I know this stuff can really get confusing. In the United States, when you hear donut economy, they just think, oh, donuts, I mean, I'm hungry now. So Europe is far ahead. I mean, I just really have to say that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was going to say, thank you for that, John, because Yeah, there is a lot of confusion there, and I've until recently, meeting with people like yourselves, I thought they were exactly the same, but there are the subtle differences there that you've explained, and why my interest in the circular economy personally was, and I think the industry, is that use and that reuse. And then meeting great people like you, John, you explain actually there's a huge amount more to the circular economy, and how powerful that actually is. It's
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think there's the idealism of what the circular economy could be versus the reality of what we're living in, right? And I think now let's dive in a little bit to what those realities are.
yeah.
If you look, for example, in here based in the US, and I want to just kind of give a long angle again, is that we have indigenous tribes and populations which have been circular their entire lives and livelihoods until, well, you could say genocide, or until the capital revolution came aboard, where capitalism, really that take, make, linear model came into play, where regeneration was using everything to maximizing its use and longevity. It was only taking what you need and maximizing it and not consuming for the sake of consumption. There's a lot of really good lessons that are out there in the space where we can really take from, nurture, and grow again. The key thing here, Paul, is how do we stretch that into the take, make, waste linear model? And so what I want to talk a little bit about today on the circular economy space is what is circular economy in the truest sense. And I want to talk a little bit about the private sector or the corporate sector's role in enabling that transition front and center. And so when you look at the circular economy space, the definition that we're really using is really informed by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And I think what the UN uses, city, states, and really looking at it, really the private sector is looking at Ellen MacArthur Foundation's view of really looking at the circular economy framework, I think really to, I would say, three traditional ways. One, when you look at the paradox of waste and designing out waste and pollution, I think the first thing that you see is that with a take, make, waste model that we have, so the extract, make, and just throw out model, is that the current model really looks at waste not as a resource, but just as a landfill item. It really doesn't have any value afterwards. The circular economy looks at waste differently. It looks at saying, let's get a handle of our waste, look at the waste streams that we already have. And first of all, can we try to find economic value out of those waste streams, right? Try to be able to reintroduce that and put that into what's called a loop, where it keeps on cascading and looping back, and we keep on reusing it, and to find economic incentives to do that. So the first pillar for Ellen MacArthur's foundation of what the circular economy is design out waste and pollution from the beginning, though. And so when you see this, Paul, you're seeing a lot of companies in the very beginning look at innovation design from inception. So it's not about really, you hear a lot about value chain. I would say value chain is kind of the wrong language to use. If you think about it, it should be a value circle, right? What is your value circle? How are we reconnecting everything circularly? Not looking at chaining, because that doesn't connect the dots back in. So when you look at designing out waste and pollution, it's like Lego going, well, we're not going to use plastic to make our box anymore. We're going to use plant-based plastic, plant-based material, bio-based material to make to fund our growth, and then identify business models that keep on reusing that over and over again. And we'll talk about some of that in a second. The next pillar for them is keep products in use. And this is, as you said earlier, kind of a no-brainer, right? Keep products in use. You would think that we're maximizing ourselves to keep products in use, but really, if you look at the current take, make, waste model, it really does not account for keeping products in use as long as they can. Actually, the way the current model goes is really best price, best deal. Consume, 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 throw it away, consume again. And we all know the stories of planned obsolescence, of looking at really designing a product to have it end quickly so you can sell more. The current model does not incentivize yet keeping products in use, but there are some exceptions. And I think one exception here in this space that's always known is when you look at Patagonia's model, where they have repair workshops. They're designed to have the longest lasting use. But I think what's important to know in a company like Patagonia is the margins are really high. So the margins are really high. They put the burden on the consumer, Paul. It's not on the companies to do that. Therefore, it's not really for the bottom of the pyramid. It's only for the people that can afford Patagonia products. The last one that I say that's also the most complicated, but I think the one that actually is the one that we really need to focus on collectively, is regenerating natural systems. And regenerating natural systems is looking literally at our natural systems of water, ocean, land, and how we can build a network or an ecosystem that feeds off circular performance together. The best example that I can give of this one is you're looking now at kelp farms off the coast of some Africa countries where they're looking at growing kelp and trying to maintain the kelp, but also to developing circular value circles to connect the kelp and regrow bio the way it should be. The one thing that we look at in the US, which is a kind of trade-off when we look at the transition to energy though, is that you look at everybody buying Teslas. That's great, but most of the energy that they're plugging into is not renewable. It's usually from fossil fuels. So again, that's not circular, but I digress. Those are the three areas that I think that when you look at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's viewpoint of it, that most companies focus on.
Fantastic, thank you, John. And there will be a link that we'll share to what John is referencing after this session. And John, could you share with us, say a company that's embraced the circular economy, how they've changed them, how that changed their business model, what the outcomes were for them, just so us in mobility, we could look at something and learn from this.
Yeah, well, I mentioned earlier that it's a growing business, I think, because companies have to compete on it. And I want to talk about competing. And one company that really competes and has revolutionized their business model around it is Philips. The Dutch-based company Philips, whether that's their healthcare products or lighting products, they've really demonstrated the ability to get out ahead of it from the CEO level and say, let's change our business model and make revenue be more profitable by being circular. Now, I want to highlight that, Paul, that there is the key for a transition to circularity. And I want to highlight, before I give the specific example of why Philips, what was key about Philips is that this was not a greenwashing ESG play. This is not just trying to say, hey, look at us, we're 100% renewable. It's, we want to be profitable for our stakeholders and differentiate ourselves against our competitors. And so what Philips really got out ahead on, and what they really understood, was their circular value circle again. Sorry, you're going to hear me say this again. They understood their value circle really well. And what they said was, wait a second. We're right now incentivized to make light bulbs, have them burn out after 1,000 watts and keep on making light bulbs. That's not really smart. It's also really not smart for emissions. It's not smart for how much electricity we're using. And actually, which is not necessarily maybe a good thing, but also the labor cost of doing that is really high. So what they said is, well, let's change the value proposition of our model. And what about selling lighting as a service? What if we actually instead went to Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam and said, yeah, so we're just going to change your light bulbs again, and you're going to buy light bulbs from us. We said, let's go to Schiphol Airport and give you a service plan, where what we're saying to you is our job is to keep your light bulbs on and keep light running efficiently at the most highest output at the lowest cost possible. And so that's exactly what they did with their company Signify, is they're creating a lighting as a service model, where instead of selling as many light bulbs, they've come in and they've now designed the proposition at Schiphol where they're incentivized not to produce the most light bulbs as possible. They're incentivized to produce the longest lasting light bulb, because their incentive is actually keeping lights on efficiently. So thus you see that planned obsolescence changing because their business model is higher. Now, when you look at Signify and you look at the profitability, the value proposition also changes. Now you have a relationship manager working with them, making sure, are we tweaking everything right? Is this okay? Is it good? So the actual profitability of that goes up higher at also a cheaper rate for Schiphol, because they're managing their lights effectively and efficiently, and we're hitting all these wonderful benchmarks. They've now taken this model and they've taken it to cities like San Francisco here in the US, and it's growing. Of course, the competitors always copy. But that's just one side of it. That's their lighting side. We can also go into the healthcare side. And I want to highlight the role of technology here in the Internet of Things, where now with the healthcare system in Europe, which, having lived in Hungary and Romania for 10 years, okay, I understand the European context of healthcare, and I like the fact that I'm putting my own social tangent on this right now. They're allowed to do this, where when you look at their MRI machines, those high-level technology machines that hospitals have to pay for, they also have products as a service selling on those. So we're not just trying to sell as many of these high-level, high price point machines. They're actually doing service plans for them. They have leasing models set to the hospital. So they take ownership, they're leasing them, they come in and fix and service them. They're designed to last the longest. So Philips has really set a good pace for that. The last thing I'll say about Philips, though, is unique, which is others, is they're in the Netherlands. And that is important. Could Philips do this in Ghana? Could Philips do this in the United States? Not necessarily. The regulatory environment does not incentivize product as a service markets in those places. The regulatory environment actually wants more that service of consumption. So what Holland has is the European Green Deal. The Netherlands also has the enabling environment legislatively to where that donut economy, that circular economy is front and center. And so I hope that just kind of paints a picture for it. But I also want to say real quickly, though, is that what the EU Green Deal has done in Europe is a little bit different too, is that it incentivizes these models. It actually incentivizes product as a service. It incentivizes the right to repair. And I think when we look at the transition to a donut economy for the world, if we can get there, a lot of it will have to be driven not just by the private sector, but the enabling environment of the policy frameworks in which companies operate in.
Yeah, John, I mean, you raised so many points there, and just on the environment in Europe, I feel we are very, very lucky this side of the pond, with governments, with the EU, United Nations backing everybody up as well. There's a great environment. And I think you raise a good point there about the complexities of this, because in mobility, a lot of people are looking for a one size fits all, something that's quick, something that's easy, but it just shows that people need to just look into the local markets and just be aware of what is available, if there are, what restrictions are there, what appetite. And it may well be that somebody doesn't have an appetite because their government, their local conditions just aren't aligning to allow them to do it. I love what you said about Philips and in mobility, whether we're destination services, we're temporary accommodation, rental furniture, household goods, where there's a big carbon footprint. People are thinking, what's a new model going to be? People need to, I think, look at the circular economy, and perhaps, collaboration is needed between different parts of the industry and say there's going to be winners and losers here. Your business may go down, our business is going to go up. So perhaps somebody moves some investment out of their traditional business into a new one. There's technology. We use a huge amount of paper still within the industry. There's a few good apps out there, like for check-ins and checkouts on destination services. A lot of virtual services coming. So again, people can look to diversify what's their model going to be. But do you think, somebody who just sticks with their traditional module, the traditional model, in a business like Global Mobility, where we're moving people, we're finding them homes, putting them in temporary accommodation, I guess if you looked at it, you would say this just isn't going to survive in this format.
No, I think you're right. I think we are evolving at a really quick pace, and I think that companies and organizations that are nimble and quick, and you hit it on the nail, that our ability to look at their circular value circle and find partnerships to help enable that are the ones that are going to stand tall. The ones that are not paying attention to it or think they can just, check mark it away, they're being left behind. One of our clients that we work with is FedEx, and they're really trying to own the space of sustainable reverse logistics. Reverse logistics, for those folks who are not aware of, is really taking products after they've been used, taking this waste, and then returning it back to tying the economic value for it. They're really trying to take a lead in that. And I think the other thing that we have to pay attention to is when you look at, the ESG metric space, global warming is real, and logistics and mobility play a big part in that. So when you're looking at, with the way the UN predicts it, and MIT and Harvard and other journals, if we get above that 1.5 Celsius degree threshold, we're looking at climate refugees. We're looking at literally the shape of how our continents look being infiltrated by water. Mobility has to kind of offset that. So companies, in my mind, especially in the mobility space, this is not really a risk to mitigate. It's a big risk. But the ones that can see it as an economic opportunity, Paul, the ones that can get ahead of it and go, wait a second, it's coming. How do we get there quicker, faster, bolder, better? And have that DNA in them are the ones that really can lead us forward as well. And will also, I think just the key difference here, Paul, is that the differentiator is understanding the enabling environment around them and how to leverage and partner with it better than others. And I think if the organizations that have that in their DNA are better suited for that, are the ones that are going to thrive.
Thank you, John. And are there any, what final thoughts could you leave us in the mobility industry with to start our journeys and embrace the circular donut economy?
Great question. And I think, when I look at this, I would say get out ahead of it right now. Start looking in the space right now. I would say, first of all, look within your operations. Where in your operations do you find opportunities to start being circular, where you can start limiting your waste streams or reusing your waste flows? Where can you start limiting your carbon footprint, but look at it a way to differentiate yourself and save money? How can you electrify your footprint quicker and faster on renewable? Start thinking about some of the examples that are in Norway and Iceland, and yes, the Nordic countries a little bit, because that's going to be coming to mainland Europe a little bit. 2, look at your competitors. Find out where your competitors are competing in these spaces. Now, don't look at this as a corporate social responsibility assessment. Look at that as an innovation assessment, and really start enabling that framework to start positioning your strategy to find those opportunities. 3rd, be innovative internally as well. Look at your foundation, your corporate giving buckets, and start looking at where your corporate giving can help you test some of these innovations on the social and environmental space. Be a little bit creative of how you think about social change now. All of it is connected together. The idea that business and profitability is separate from shareholder value is not true anymore. And the quicker one understands that and then sees the opportunities in it, it's great. And the last thing I'll say is that help lead us forward. You are responsible to help do this. The mobility industry itself, by you taking ownership of it and evolving, can help humanity have a much better pace of how do we have to deal with the coming storm that we're dealing with. So good luck with it. And I think those are my thoughts. I'll hope that helps.
John, thank you so much for your thoughts. You've got so much knowledge on this, and you've, spoken to so many different companies and helped companies in so many different industries. And I love the way you summed up, because a lot of people are struggling where to start and what's important. I think the way you just literally summed that up is a great way for companies to actually take those elements you've discussed and actually help them bring their sustainability program together to make a start, and then at least identify where they can actually make a difference, where they want to go, but how it interlocks with the rest of their business and the social economic impact. And then I love the way, everything ties in with an economic outcome, but it's the social side and the environmental impact as well. So yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Paul. Well, I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks for the time, and I look forward to being a resource. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you.